Okay, it is 5 o'clock. We are going to call the August 17th, 2022 Quality of Life Committee meeting to order. If I can please get a roll call.
Chair Councilor Cassett.
I'm here.
Councilor Chavez is absent.
Yes, she's excused.
Okay. Councilor Lee Garcia.
Here.
Councilor Michael Garcia.
Present.
Councilor Villarreal.
Present.
You have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. And moving to approval of the agenda, staff, we do have some changes. Can you please go through those?
Madam Chair, we are removing item B. Request for B as in boy, request for approval of amendment number 1 of the amended mortgage agreement for Tierra Contenta, which authorizes the city manager to grant release of the mortgage on behalf of the city in order to facilitate land sales or phase 3 development of Tierra Contenta.
Wonderful, thank you. And in addition, the sponsors have requested that item J be postponed indefinitely. This is the consideration of a bill sponsored by Councilor Romero Worth, Mayor Weber, and Councilor Chavez. It's an ordinance repealing Section 10-11 of Santa Fe City Code 1987, creating a new Section 10-11 to establish an ordinance relating to shopping carts, incentivizing retail establishments to ensure their shopping carts remain on their property, and imposing a fee for shopping cart return and establishing an effective date. So again, this is postponed indefinitely, so we will not be hearing it tonight. Are there any other changes from staff or members of the committee? And if not, what are the wishes of the committee?
Madam Chair, just a point of clarification. Can you explain more why item B as in boy was taken off?
Yes, this actually already went through, and we've already approved it at the governing body, and it somehow wound up on both the finance and the quality of life agenda again this week. So,
Yeah, I was like, I thought this was a
yeah, weird.
Okay.
The reason you had deja vu is because you have already seen this. So that's why.
Okay, thank you.
Can I get a motion to approve as amended?
Move to approve as amended.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to approval of the consent agenda. Any items that the committee would like to remove?
Yep.
Councilor Lee Garcia.
Madam Chair, I'd like to pull item I, please.
Councilwoman Renee Villarreal.
Thanks.
I don't know why I said your full name. Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Do you remember my name?
Sorry. Jamie Cassett. I want to just get clarification on some questions we had for item, sorry, I lost it again, A, as a follow-up from finance, and then item K. That's it. Thank you.
Any other items? And if not, can I get a motion to approve as amended?
Move to approve as amended. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to approval of the minutes. Are there any changes from staff or from members of the committee? And if not, what are the wishes of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I wasn't present, Madam Chair.
Michael Garcia abstained as he was not present. And that motion passes. Moving on to presentations. We have a Midtown progress report, Midtown moving forward. Updates on the Midtown redevelopment plans. We have Rich Brown, Lee Logston, and do we have Daniel Hernandez?
Madam Chair, good evening to council. I'm waiting for Daniel Hernandez, who's going to run the presentation, but I'm ready to go and hopefully be able to do the presentation if he's not there.
Okay.
But I'll start now. I'll just have to log into my computer.
Great.
No, I have a laptop, so I'm good. President.
All right, Rich, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the council. Thank you for the time tonight. Daniel Hernandez, our project manager, is on his way, and I'm going to try to enlighten everyone of what I know on his presentation deck for our progress report. Lee Logston, our asset development manager, is here as we talk about, oh, there's the man of the hour. That's okay. I want to introduce you to Daniel Hernandez, Midtown project manager. How's that? Big breath. So while he's catching his breath, so as you know, we had a resolution pass for Midtown redevelopment, and as you see on the slides here, there were development action plans that we're going through, and in this progress report, Daniel has updated where we are in the progress, and we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the slides as to where we are, but just as an overview for the redevelopment plans and what we have together. So we are in the process of rezoning the site. We recently had a ENN, and those answers to the questions from the ENN process have been posted on our website and has been put out into the press. So if you have any questions about the ENN, you can find it at midtowndistrictsantafe.com. So we're moving forward with that, and Lee will speak to, I think, also when the application is due. I think it's in next week. It's due to the Land Use Department. Next, we're working on our infrastructure plan. We are engaged with an outside vendor who's helping us with assessments on infrastructure, so that is in the process. That is a key part of how do we get to our land and master planning that we're working on altogether. Next, we're looking at the sites and buildings that are up for reuse. Samuel Burnett from the Public Works Department works closely with our team on what buildings are in the reuse phase, what buildings are in the demolition phase, what buildings are in a strategic underperforming stage. And the team is working through those plans. Daniel will speak in a little minute about RFPs that are going out for our existing buildings. I call them our legacy buildings. So we have the Visual Arts Center, we have the Garson Performance Theater, we have the Garson Production Studios, and then we're also working through what we're going to do for ideas for innovation for the Ferguson Library. Additionally, we are looking at a next phase beyond the RFPs once the rezoning is done and infrastructure is in place and land development plan is in place on phase one for affordable housing. And Daniel can speak to that in the subsequent slides. From there, we have been having ongoing conversations about mechanisms for funding. There are various ways to fund this development, and as a city, we're probably going to have to put together what they call the subsidies, which is all the funding for the infrastructure, roads, stormwater, power, internet, et cetera, et cetera. So we are working with the finance department and our consultants from strategic economics around the land economics plan, and we're hoping to have that. Daniel can speak to, I think that's coming up in a couple of weeks. We're going to have a presentation on that, and it may be a series. It'll come to finance first as an educational series because there's a lot of words and language they use that could be a little hard to understand, but we want to make sure that we keep it so that the public and the council understands what we're about to do as we look at our economics to get this moving. So then after that, we have currently and engaged on an ongoing basis. We've just finished the public engagement. We're in another continuing education phase, and it's really about feedback. So Daniel's going to speak to the community development plan, and he's going to speak to the land development plan. And those two plans intersect to create our master plan for the development site. And Daniel will speak to that, where we are in the process, and he has a couple of slides that are exciting to understand what the timeline is, how does it work, and what is our mission from that standpoint. So hopefully Daniel has caught his breath, and I'm going to turn it over to him. Daniel, are you ready?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. That's okay.
So this, you've seen a few of these slides before, but the one that you just saw actually has some updates as far as like it's happening. So things are on the ground, and these next few months, there's just so much activity that council members, the public, planning commission will be seeing. But what's exciting news is Lee Logston is here, is completing the land application, the land use application. It will go in next Monday, August 22nd, and we'll have more updates. There's a future slide about that, but it's a significant moment. That's really the culmination of a lot of work that's been happening over the past few years, and it's finally getting into an application to the land use office. The other one is the community development plan, and that's will be the focus of tonight. So you'll be the first committee actually to get some insights into the community development plan that have been informed by many years of community input, which started probably in the link era when people were talking about the link overlay, but more importantly during the 2018 summer, when communities were talking about the vision of Midtown that culminated in the, I think it's called the Midtown Campus Report, that informed the resolution about the Midtown Planning Guidelines. And then more recently, the work that we did with the University of New Mexico Design Planning Assistance Center, and worked with the Midtown Engagement Partners to create the Midtown Engagement Report, which is getting posted either tonight or tomorrow. I keep on texting like, is it up yet? But it should go up either today or tomorrow. So you'll see it definitely this week posted, Midtown Engagement Report. So again, this sort of just builds on what I just said. This is all the kind of documents that really, really were key to informing the community development plan and the land development plan. All of these reports are and will be, as I said, posted on the website for everyone to see. So there's still a lot of questions, and if you have advice for us, it would be helpful. But we're working with the communications team to be able to describe what these plans do, their differences, and how they intersect. So we're calling them the Midtown Redevelopment Plans. Two plans come together to really provide guidance and regulatory guidance for the future of the Midtown site. The land development plan is exactly that. It describes on what can happen on the land. The land uses, design standards, what can and cannot get built on that property. That comes from a lot of discussions about what people want to see built there. That is a regulatory document that is a legal document that has to be followed when anyone wants to do any type of development on that property. So again, it's regulatory, it's legal, it goes to the Planning Commission, then it goes to the governing body for a ratification of the Planning Commission's recommendation for approval. The Community Development Plan is a policy document. It is not a regulatory or a legal document, but it is something that you will approve through the governing body will approve through a resolution. And it's different from the Land Development Plan in that it's not regulatory, but it helps to implement policies that we've heard all along from the community. We want to see these levels of affordability. We want these types of jobs. We want this type of job access. This is the type of public programming we want to see. This is the involvement of the public in ongoing governance of the site that we want to see. These different types of things that aren't about what you can and cannot build on the land, but what happens from a much more policy, social environment that can be created at Midtown to achieve a lot of community development goals. So again, this is the process for the land development plan, the regulatory document. It goes first as an application. We started out in July of last month, July 14th, with the early neighborhood notification meeting. It's a public hearing that's required to even enter into the land use approvals process. Then we'll be submitting the application again in August. We'll be presenting to the different committees, as you see on here. And finally, it will go to the commission on October 6th, and then, like I said earlier, to the governing body for ratification on November 9th. This is just a high-level view of the master plan. It was published as part of the ENM presentation. The master plan will be, excerpts from the master plan will also be put on the website beginning this week, so that the public has access to excerpts. Most of the master plan will be on the website now during the application period, so that people can look at it, and we'll be receiving comments about it. And then again, we'll hear more comments during the hearing process in October. So again, I'm not going to read all of this, but I believe you have this presentation, and I encourage you to sort of understand what the master plan does as far as creating the design guidelines, the types of land development that we want to see at Midtown. It is the land use development, the land development plan includes both the master plan and the zoning. The zoning is what says what can and cannot be built. The master plan includes phases of development where infrastructure and block patterns are located, uses and how they're spread around the site, the existing buildings that will remain on the site, So it allows us then to begin parcelizing the site so that we can begin disposing, selling property or master leasing property through the RFP process. The community development plan, as I said earlier, is a policy document. So it is, again, it's based on all of the community input and more recently the Midtown Engagement Partners report. We have organized it in the elements of sustainability. From the very beginning, we heard a lot of people wanting us to define what equity and sustainability would be at Midtown. So we listened a lot to the elements of sustainability that they'd want to see there. They're organized under the elements, the international elements of sustainability, equity, environment, economy, and specific to Santa Fe, culture. We knew that one of the main drivers is how we might think about culture at Midtown and the future of, and ways that Midtown can promote ideas around culture. So the equity chapter is focused primarily on housing affordability. I had presented to the governing, I think it was to the governing body last month. There was a lot of questions about housing affordability. It goes into greater detail in the community development plan. There was comments by some of you about the percentages of affordability. We've increased the levels of affordability to 30%. And so there's a higher portion, and it describes how they will be built on various sites, as well as through the inclusionary requirements that the city has. Alexandra, who was here? Oh, there she is. Can help a lot on crafting that chapter, particularly on the housing affordability. It also talks about RFPs that we want to get out to help facilitate and build capacity for either existing developers to work with community organizations as part of the housing development, so that we begin building a stronger community development network of developers who can begin implementing and participating in housing development in communities. We thought that was an important thing to help think about future neighborhoods like the Hopewell Band neighborhood. We heard a lot through the process, the fears of displacement, and one of the things that's in there is creating a neighborhood stabilization plan that the city would support in partnership, similar to the way that we did with the Midtown Engagement Partners, having a co-created, co-led planning process for a neighborhood stabilization plan for the Hopewell Man and surrounding neighborhoods that will be affected by development. The environment chapter of the community development plan is focused on green and sustainability for the site. So it talks a lot about the types of resilient infrastructure, green infrastructure, water retention, the reduction of water use in Midtown as well. It has blocks and street patterns that promote healthy walking blocks. So they're not long blocks, they're blocks that can accommodate the type of development we want to see, but also are distance-wise help facilitate and promote walkability and bikeability. There's open space. We heard a lot about the need and desire for open space at Midtown, and also connecting the open space in Midtown to existing Midtown like Miles Park that's so close from an aerial perspective, but right now seems so far away. So how we might connect the green space, open space in Midtown to existing, so to kind of broaden that network. There is a plaza in the interior of Midtown also that is dimensioned so that it can accommodate various community events. We heard all types of events from concert theaters, powwows, so that it can accommodate various types of cultural events that people want to see there. And again, it just goes into a lot of connectivity. We built a lot on what was already done in the link overlay ordinance, and that was the premise of the way that we thought about the redevelopment of Midtown, but we added additional design standards to create the type of density and walkability and street frontages to ensure a pedestrian-friendly environment. In the economy chapter, we focus a lot about job creation. So we know that, and this is since 2018, that film production was the expansion of film production at the site was really important, as well as technology that supports film production, but other types of technology as well. So it just wasn't about creating the jobs, but it was identifying ways that we ensured that that residents had access to those jobs. So there's thoughts about internship programs that we'd want to write into RFPs, that we want to make that a competitive criteria for the way that a respondent might say, well, we can create this level of internships annually for local residents, as well as ways that they would communicate jobs, available jobs, and potential training opportunities. So again, for local residents to access jobs, we would write those in preferences into the RFPs so that we would get competitive responses, and we would judge them based on their ability to achieve some of these community development goals. Yeah, so anyway, that's the economy chapter. Then, did it go? So the culture chapter is probably the most qualitative sort of oriented, but we wanted to try to put some specific things in there. One of the key pieces that is going on in a lot of cities is just recognizing that a lot of the community arts programs that we see in neighborhoods also run the risk of displacement from their communities. And they've been such important landmarks in their communities because they do hold the treasures of community arts and culture. So one of the key things that we're getting out initially in this in the RFP process is the existing visual arts center for a community arts with the goal of stabilizing community arts. So again, it's just the RFP is structured right now so that we want to see responses that stabilize the operating expenses through leases so that there are affordable spaces in the Visual Arts Center for community arts programming and organizations. The other thing was also a lot about, there was a lot of discussion about public programming. And so there's the community development plan talks about facilitating agreements with organizations to do programming at Midtown, at the Midtown site, and rather than thinking that there's a centralized entity that does all the programming, that they would do collaborations with existing organizations to facilitate arts and cultural programming and placemaking at Midtown. And as many other people are saying, that we need to stop saying placemaking in places that have a really rich sense of place, and a phrase that is going around the country is being called placekeeping, which I really enjoy. So I put that in the Midtown plan as well. So again, we plan on just trying to think of different ways, and I think it'll continue to evolve, but we wanted to open up the conversation in the community development plan. One thing that we're doing is we want to reuse, for example, the existing sculpture that's on the site and place it back in the site into public spaces. And also there's proposals for ways that we want to think about ways for community to participate as advisors or otherwise in the governance of Midtown. So one of the things that we will be discussing as you, as the governing body, will continue to hear about the Metropolitan Community Development Area is governance structure, and how that governance structure thinks about, interacts with community participation in governance and programming of future of Midtown. So again, the community development plan is getting posted this week. It's draft. It is not formatted. It's like a Word document. It's not pretty right now, but we wanted to get it circulated rather than think of it as a pretty document. We wanted to think of it as a document that begins to stimulate conversation. So here's the rollout. Again, it's getting posted this week. We're presenting this evening to the Quality of Life presentation, to Quality of Life. We're going to go to the governing body to make a brief presentation on it. We'll go to the Planning Commission, and we wanted to do that before they heard the land development plan, so that they understood the relationship of the community development plan to the land development plan. We'll go back again as one of our progress reports to the governing body. Then when we're getting into the resolution mode for your approval, for the governing body's approval, we'll go to EDAC, Finance Committee, and then ultimately to the governing body. They will hear the community development plan the same night as the land development plan, so we can talk about that night, the intersection between those two plans, and the importance of getting them approved at the same time. I put this as one of the last slides because I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that the main reports that we heard, besides the many, many emails, the many, many comments we get every day about the future of Midtown, these reports hold a lot of information, and they were truly used as to inform the community development plan. And again, we are still in feedback and education mode. That we'll be going through the required public hearings for approvals, particularly the land development plan, and then again, as we present the community development plan, and committees, and ultimately to the governing body. But also there is a community planning stipend program that we're keep on telling community groups like, look, tell us what you want to do. We have funds available to defray some of the costs for hosting an event. We put together just a small group of us who are able to go to events to help clarify questions that people may have. So it's Rich, Alexandra, Lee, myself, Andrea. So we're all available to help, go to these meetings. And one of us, or two of us, will be there when we're asked. Again, they're on the website, these documents. I encourage you to visit them. They're there for the public. So that ends my presentation, but I'm here for questions. And Rich's too, Alex and Andrea, Lee, we're all here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for the presentation. I'll move to the committee questions. Councilor Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Rich, for the information. I do have a number of questions, I guess, and I'll first start off focusing on the reports. And you said that they'll be available this week?
Yeah,
And
it might be there tonight, but
both of them?
yes.
Okay, and are we going to send out a press release, anything like that, to notify folks? Okay, just because sometimes it's harder to access. I know we've been pushing folks to the Midtown site, but if we can do a press release as well, notifying folks that it's available, fantastic. Definitely look forward to reading both reports. Second question I've got is around the master plan. You gave us, from what it looks like, a very much a rough sketch of what's being proposed at the site. If we can pull that slide up, that slide 7, I think, or 6. So if you can help me understand, because
Sorry.
sure, no worries.
To the presentation.
There we go. And so the gray buildings, I'm assuming in the middle, are going to be the new redeveloped structures, where Fogelson is right above it. It's got kind of wider rooftop. That's the library structure. But it looks like what's being proposed is a lot of the stuff that's there, because I know that there had been some identified locations where we might keep it, such as Alumni Hall. And from this draft, it looks like completely new structures centered around this plaza area that you spoke about. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so, as far as the other structures that were listed as kind of legacy structures, we've got Fogelson. What were some of the other structures that folks were wanting to keep? And help me understand where they're on the map, because it is a little lower resolution on my end.
Yeah.
Nice and clean there.
So we presented in, I can't remember, beginning of, I don't remember, anyway, at the beginning of the year, we did an existing buildings presentation and identified the priority buildings, which were the Visual Arts Center, the Performing Arts, Garson Performing Arts buildings, that complex, Library Complex, St. Michael's Hall, and then the Garson Studios and Benildes Hall.
Okay, but it looks like where Alumni Hall is, it's going to be a new building from this perspective.
There's a parcel that where Alumni Hall is currently.
Okay, and then all the other legacy buildings are up at the top, right by the library in
Yes.
top left corner.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to walk left of the property a little more. That's the state property that we at one time had hoped of having a land swap. Is that finally not going to go through?
Madam Chair, I can speak a little bit to that. And Ms. Salazar also on the legal team can speak to it. Yes, right now we, with our asset development manager, Lee Bluffton and Mr. Terry Lease, we are working with the state GSD, and they've agreed to swap the land with us. We had little teeny parcels in the beginning, but they're agreed to swap all of the land. And I was going to ask Mr. Hernandez if he could just walk over to the map to show this. I don't know if you can see them on YouTube, but he can show you kind of where those slides are. I don't know if Lee can. the land swap areas that we were. Yes, right there. Yeah. Yeah, let me back it up. We're not hearing them, okay, so that's fine. I'll be able to articulate it then, Lee. So where Lee's hand is to the left, just make a L shape from that left green valley there, all the way up. There's state land there that will be swapped with city land in the coming months. We're working through the legal process, the public process. We have to go to the Department of Finance to present the land plan. We have to go to the Legislative Finance Committee to present this plan, and then we also have to get to the legislature, and it's coming up to this winter session that's coming. So Ms. Salazar, Mr. Loxton, and Mr. Lease will be working through that land development plan with the person's name is Anna Silva. She works for the state GSD. So we're working through that swap. We don't have a slide that shows the city land that we are swapping, but they are very aware of the land we're doing. So we're very excited because we've been working for a couple of years to get this land, and they finally agreed that they're going to allow us to swap all the land. I want to add, though, Councilor Garcia, that there is some federal land there that we're still in negotiation with. So we uncovered that the Forest Service is not the only federal government owner in that land. It's also the Park Service. And the Forest Service seems to be eager to swap the land, but the Park Service is not yet. So we're working through what needs to happen. So in that plan there, you will see a walkway, the next one up right there, Lee. You'll see an access way. We're trying to get a right-of-way to connect the park to our parcels. So that's part of the negotiation process we're working through. But first and foremost, we're working through the land swap with the state.
Okay, and just for the record, where's the land, the city land that the state will, is swapping us for?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, so the city land, and Ms. Garcia might, Ms. Salazar might be able to help me further, but so we have land on Camina Entrada by the Police Enforcement Academy, Police Academy. That whole parcel there, both the Academy building and all of their roadway test drive place, that land is there. We also have land, let's see, we have all those parcels. Ms. Salazar, what's the next one?
So the land that we're swapping with them?
Yes.
So it's the Camino Entrada impound lot that sits across from the DPS, the Department of Public Safety, and the Department of Public Safety land. Those are the two people.
Right. Okay. And this land swap, as we see the documents pulled together, means that the state will probably owe us potentially up to $5 million because our land is of much more value than the current undeveloped land that you see there.
Okay, and that was a follow-up question. Is it in regards to value? Because I do see the south side property much more valuable than this one. You clarified that for me, so thank you, Director Brown. I guess my next question, and it's more of a concern than a question in regards that we're including Franklin Miles Park as green space where it never was part of Midtown property. It was never part of the college campus. And so now we're trying to appease the request of open space with already existing open space. And I think the request from community members was to develop open space on the property, not say, here's already existing space, and we're just going to connect it, which it is a bit disappointing to me. I think, you know, when we look at the other open space that's in front of the now existing Lafarge Library and former Tina Grego Pool, same thing, open space, that was already existing. We're not developing anything. So we're not adding value in the sense of open space and green space, which the community has asked for. I think they're asking for that space within the complex of Midtown as it gets redeveloped. Instead, we're pushing them off to already existing space. So just very disappointed we're going in that direction.
If I can clarify, so we're using the open space requirements that are established within the link. So the link, again, has been the basis of the entire plan, and we've added more beyond that because of the plaza and because of all the it'll be both a combination recreational and green infrastructure space. The Miles Park is not part of that calculation. What we're proposing is that why not connect it? It's a great space and probably doesn't get utilized as much as it should or could. And if we begin thinking about these potential events or other things that can happen between the Midtown interior site to this existing park, that's a great thing. But it's not being included as part of these. So we're not trying to confuse people. We were just trying to sort of say, like, wow, this is amazing. We can create a connection.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And I fully support the connection. I'm glad that we're able to connect and have that potentially as an access point. I think that was also other concerns raised by folks was access in and out. Right now, there currently is only 2 access points to the property. That could potentially be a 3rd access point. And so I don't really see on this map that kind of as, is that what that top white line is, a road kind of through? Or it looks like a road. I know Lee kind of pointed a pathway, but is there a road that goes from the Midtown campus to Franklin Miles, or is that just a pathway?
Chair, Councilor Garcia, so technically, we don't really have all of the master plan in this presentation because you will be just citing on the master plan. So the master plan itself, we really can't go very deep into, and this depiction is a rough depiction. We'll be entering our application, I believe, on Monday. And after that, it will go through the process, and so you will see the complete master plan, which has all this information included in it, but we cannot present it to you today.
Because, thank you, Ms. Elzer, and that's because it's going to application? I mean, we've got to wait to submit an application to make a plan public? I mean, can you help me understand that?
You are a final, as the governing body, you'll be a final adjudicator on the determination of whether you're accepting the master plan or not. So technically, we sit in the applicant situation, not in the city situation, which is very strange. So because of that process, we don't want to be presenting a master plan that hasn't been entered as an application, gone to Planning Commission, and brought to you in an appropriate manner. So that's why we're withholding a lot of information about the master plan, because it will be an application.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, it's an odd space we're in because we're both developer and we're also the landowner. And normally, you would, as a developer, you would not get any of this information until it came to the Planning Commission and the application was in. And then you, as a judge, would then get to approve the plan once the Planning Commission reviews it. But because we're also the landowner, what we're trying to do is make sure the public understands the progress that's happening. So we have to kind of be at a 1,000-foot view until we get to that point, because we don't want to, derail the process of you as a judge ultimately for a master plan. So we're in this odd space where we're both a developer and a landowner, and we've actually just, over the last couple of weeks, separated our teams, where we have a developer team and we have a land use team that are separated out. So we're now in that space. We're very excited about that part, but we're now in that space where we have to separate out.
Okay, thank you for helping to clarify, but I think with the last significant project such as this, which was the rail yard project, their master plan was worked on by the public, whereas we're taking some input, but we're doing it all ourselves, which is not the same process. And I think what concerns me with the process we're going through now is that we could be so far down the road where folks might put forth the argument, we've already done this work, we can't really change stuff, whereas when we did the rail yard development, the master plan was a public working document, and everybody knew what the master plan was, whereas that's not the case with this. And I think that is what kind of, at least from the feedback I've heard in regards to what is going on there, we've all been given the kind of feedback, we're going to see housing, we're going to see some economic industry, whether it be business, nonprofit, et cetera, potentially city services there, and then green space. I think the lack of details is what's frustrating folks, and we're getting a little more here with this map, but to hear, we've got to introduce formally to get that information when ultimately this property is the taxpayers' property. It's the citizens and residents of Santa Fe's property, and they should have a say before application is submitted. And I think that is where I think this process is a bit different than what's kind of been hosted in the past. And I think that's where some of our residents are really having a tough time, kind of really,
Let me speak to that.
really kind of learning the process, learning the next steps, and having that ultimate buy-in, so to speak.
And Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, I appreciate your concern, and I want to say, this slide says that we've had almost 4 different engagement opportunities for the whole public to understand. We've had progress reports, we've had engagements, we've had public hearings, we're going to do more stipend. So we have had a lot of public input from 2018 to present, and so if we don't take the public information we've received so far, we're never going to develop this property. So I understand that there are folks who say, I don't understand what's going on. We are trying our best to communicate out. There is all this information that's been gathered. So to Daniel's point about a community development plan, that is based upon the culmination of all of those engagement opportunities we've had since 2018. So we're trying to get to the point where, 1, we owe debt, and 2, we're trying to develop the land. So at some point, we have to take the feedback we've received and turn it into action. And that's kind of where we are right now. So if you have constituents or people who are concerned that they don't know where we are in the process, I invite them to call me or Daniel or send us an email. We're more than happy to maybe do a town hall with them or a webinar, because we're at the point where it's my responsibility to put this development action into place. And we are now putting more budget together for this stipend program. So we're at that 4th level of getting more feedback so that we can make sure that every citizen, constituent has a say in where we are. So that's kind of where we are. But to your point about the master plan, and it's not very clear, it's only because we're trying to protect the legal process of you policymakers that I don't want to get to a place where someone in the public says, Councilor Garcia has seen this whole plan and he could prejudge it now. And so as a private developer, you would not. So we're walking this very thin line, silk line, to say, here's our progress, here's what you've given us to move forward as a resolution, here are all the public engagement we've done, we're now at a feedback stage, here are the 2 plans that merge together, to the point where we will submit our application, we will get to the planning committee, that's another place where the public can completely have their feedback. So that's a 5th spot they'll have. And once that's done, then we go through the committee review process. So finance, EDAC, quality of life, public works because of infrastructure, and then the governing body. So we have 5 more occasions where we still will have an opportunity to get public feedback or folks who are asking where are we in the process so we can get it done. But we would love to keep the movement moving because we do see we have a housing deficit, right? We're trying to pay back our debt, and we're also trying to make sure that we are bringing some return in the community and return on investment in the money that we're spending to put the infrastructure together and get our redevelopment going. So hopefully that answers your question from a where we are standpoint. So
It does, Director Brown, but I guess my question is, what makes the process so much different between this and the rail yard, where that was a completely open process, completely open master plan, and this one is not following that? I mean, has there been law changes, policy changes? Because why was that allowed for a master plan to be developed publicly? Nothing prevented councilors from having that knowledge, versus now where a master plan can't be presented to the stakeholders, which are the citizens. I would argue, if I was not in the capacity of a counselor, I, as a taxpayer, have a right to say in that property, and I want to understand what the master plan is. And so I guess I'm just trying to understand what's so different in the process legally that prohibits us from presenting that master plan, which didn't prevent it in the past.
Dan, you want to speak to it?
I do want to just sort of say what we're doing is actually very regulated and on one level, and then on another level, we went through the early neighborhood notification process on July 14th, and we had, I don't know how many questions that are now posted on the website in Spanish and English. many, it took us much time to answer and be responsive to each one of them. And we have from now, since July 14th, and now the master plan and the community development are posted, the public has access to them. We have all through August, September, October, November is when it comes back to you. So there's still a lot of time, and the reason we created the stipend program is so that we are opening it up. Like, tell us what you want to know. How do you want to know it? What can we do to make it accessible? So there's actually a lot of time between now and then. I don't know how the rail yards plan was done, but this was a very different process that we took. Particularly this Midtown Engagement Partners project. So there's been a lot of dialogue, and we're trying to capture it. So the question now is, did we capture it? And so here it is. It's posted. Call us. Invite us to a workshop. It's open, and we want to, we now have it ready to kind of chew on. So there's months now still before we get to the governing body to be able to have that dialogue.
Okay. And I guess there's not an answer to my question because, again, the meat of the question is, what legally prohibits us from presenting the master plan to the public before it goes to application?
Counselor, I'm going to ask us to move on from this question because I don't think there was anybody here who was part of the rail yard process, and I'm not sure what the rail yard process looked like in terms of the approvals. So while there has been this real public component, I think that it would be crucial of us to maybe talk to somebody who watched the rail yard approval process and how that moved through with the governing body. Because what I'm hearing right now is that I don't believe that unless somebody let me know if anybody has knowledge of what the land use approval process looked like and at what point the governing body moved into the quasi-judicial role with rail yard, and if not, we will work on getting that answer from somebody who was around and who did have that experience.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Madam Chair, because I don't think that there has been any rule changes that would prohibit that. So with that being said, I look forward to that information being presented.
Director Ladd, do you have some more information on this?
Madam Chair, one thing I might suggest, and again, I like your question, like, let's ask a person who's actually here, but a difference with the Rail Yard Corporation was that the Rail Yard Corporation, as a nonprofit entity separate from the city, was set up to assist the city with that whole process and the liaison with the public. So it was different because we knew the ownership model was different at that time, that the city was going to retain ownership of the land. So it's a very different kind of process, and because we don't have that external master developer or development entity, and we know that most likely most of the land will be sold, it's just it's a different process. But I think, I do think it'd be interesting to ask that question to someone who actually, I think I was at the city maybe on the tail end of that, but yeah.
Sure, and I think we can reach out to the Rail Yard Corporation. There's lots of folks that have historical knowledge on that process.
Yes.
Director Lett, actually have my next question, probably is for you. Mr. Hernandez earlier said that we've upped the affordable housing to about 30%. So does that mean that we would only hit that threshold if everybody doesn't opt out of the fee in lieu of? So could that then go down?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, the goal is to hit that 30%. We imagine that there will be some flexibility where some of the tracks will be developed at a much higher percentage. We know that some of them will be reserved for 100% affordability. So there may be a range of affordability with the market tracks that are developed by market rate developers. But that's very consistent with how Tierra Contenta has been developed. There's an overall goal for 40%, but some tracks they don't even hit 20%, but others are 100%. So the idea is at the end of the day, of all of our units, 30% will be price restricted or rent restricted and occupied by income qualified families and individuals.
Okay, so I guess if you can help me just further understand, nothing would prohibit a purchaser of land from paying the in lieu of fee, which could ultimately lessen that 30% number. I understand that there's going to be some tracts of land that's going to be 100%, but would there be a potential for a tract of land for an owner to pay in lieu of fee, which would be at 0%?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, I think it's actually a little bit early to tell because what we're doing is we're leveraging the affordability requirement to maximize the community benefit. So if we have a developer who wants to do a really great project that meets other community benefit goals, in lieu of the affordability on that site, we would leverage some other contribution, and then we would ensure that any fees that were collected were used to the benefit of the site or the surrounding neighborhoods.
Okay, so I'm going to take that answer as a no, there's nothing that's going to prohibit in lieu of fee being an opportunity for a landowner.
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, I wouldn't say that at all because it's very closely regulated and tied to the priorities in the community development plan. The goal is 30%. We can't promise 30% before we know what the market's going to bear, but we also don't know what community benefit we want to leverage yet.
Okay. Well, and I think, thank you, Director Ladd, but I think we could promise that in the sense of, and this is where I've asked for guidance from our legal office, which still haven't received yet, in regards to could the city, given that it is our land, cancel the in lieu of fee option for this particular property. That way we can ensure that affordable housing is built and developers don't take the in lieu of fee route, because I think we've heard loud and clear since we've begun this process in the last 4 or 5 years that affordable housing and housing needs to be a priority. And I'd hate for us to be 10 years down the road and say we had hoped we'd hit the 30% mark, but we only ended up with 18%, 20%. I think we need to do everything and use every tool in our tool belt to ensure that we hit the 30% mark. That should be the baseline. As I spoke, and when we got the update during our governing body meeting, we should be striving to provide as much affordable housing opportunities as possible. And if we have the in lieu of fee option for this particular property, I don't see us hitting that mark. I only see 30% as the ceiling and going down from there, unfortunately. My last question is around the district.
Did you have a response to that? You were looking to get a response to that.
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, I wanted to also point out that because will be disposing of the land through RFPs, that gives us a huge amount of leverage as well. So if we, right now, the level of affordability is contained, first of all, within our regulation for the Santa Fe Homes program, but also from the link overlay, regulation. So if we were to mandate a 30% affordability requirement just for Midtown, we'd have to change the link overlay as well. We're looking to try to be more flexible and to leverage additional benefit through the RFPs, because that's our real leverage.
Right. No, I completely understand, Director Ladd, and I think the mandate is not what I would advocate for. What I would advocate for is the elimination of the fee in lieu of option. I think that shouldn't be an option as for this particular property. We offer up that option, and you see how many folks, as they're developing housing around our city, how many folks are opting out of it. I understand that they're paying into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but that's not what was asked for by the residents of Santa Fe to go into this site. So I appreciate that, but with that being said, I definitely, as we move forward, Director Brown, if we can get guidance for our meeting next week, the update in regards to, do we have the legal capability to eliminate the fee in lieu of option for this property, given that it is our property? I understand that when other personal private properties, we don't have that option, but given that this is our property, we should be able to say, not an option. You want to buy it, you've got to meet the standard and not pay an in lieu of fee. So I'd like if we could get that update next week during our governing body meeting. My last question revolves around the district planning and governance, and it was mentioned that about an MRA. So are we still exploring the opportunity to get this property I guess, officially tagged as blighted?
We're officially trying to get it marked as a metropolitan redevelopment area. And the reason for that is it's one of the, again, you've talked about tools in the toolbox. Any redevelopment incentive program that's available through the state, federal government, or locally, we want to tap, and then we think that the MRA can do that. We hope that, elected officials and people who are in office can help us explain what blight means in the current environment, meaning it's not blight in an old sort of slum clearance sort of program. Blight is really when you have infrastructure that's not supporting the type of development you want to see in a neighborhood. The campus does not have the type of infrastructure. Blight also means parcels that are underdeveloped. Well, campus has underdeveloped parcels. So that's why we really are, blight is an old, weird term, but unfortunately it's one that we have to use in order to comply with the legal requirements to get a site designated as an MRA. So our goal is to get an MRA district assigned to the Midtown district, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. And I guess a follow-up to that is some of the maps that were shown to us in the past included neighborhoods as part of potentially that designation. Is that still a path forward, or it would be solely the campus?
In the community development plan, it talks about it just being the campus area, the link overlay district, and a little bit of the opportunity zone district, but no residential areas. And it also in the community development plan says that it may be one of the considerations that the neighborhood or the community wants to consider when they do their neighborhood stabilization plan.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. And again, I thank you, Director Ladd, Director Brown, for all the questions. I know some of them were challenging, but I think these are questions that the public have been asking, and I think we've got to be able to respond. I know this has been a long process. I completely agree with you, Director Brown, that we need to get moving. But there are some things that, I guess, that are being different now that have been done differently in the past, and the clarification of why has been constantly asked. And if we can get that in regards to particularly how this process is being conducted differently than we've done it in the past, that would be great. But again, thank you all for the information. I appreciate it. No other questions, Madam Chair.
Councilman Vitarell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I particularly want to say thanks to the ENN responses. They were helpful to hear, well, because I didn't get to be at the presentation fully, so I didn't get to see what people were asking. And so I think taking the time to respond to those was helpful for me and hopefully for the public. They're a bit hard to find, just so you know, on the website. You have to go through a bottom page and through the menu. And so I don't know if there's an ability to kind of tweak our website. I could talk to you offline about this, because I think there's ways that you could consolidate some sections and then actually go have areas where people can go directly to where they want to go to find a certain bit of information. So we could talk offline about that. But I think in general it was very helpful. And it was very clear people were all about trying to understand the affordability concepts, and also why 30% and what does 100% look like. And then, fee in lieu of did come up. And I think I think it is important, and you've already know how I feel about whenever we have control over our own land, we should prioritize as much as possible to get units. And when I say units, it's not because we don't like fee in lieu of. I think it's been helpful for us. We've seen it in CDC when we utilize those grants for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. They're important. But now as we're kind of moving forward with this crisis situation, we don't have units. We don't have units. And the ones that we used to have, their units are not necessarily affordable, not through the city program, but just how things are changing, rents going up, and we don't have control over that because we can't set rent restrictions or rent ceilings. So I can understand why the public is like, please give us some more units. And I know we're trying to do this in this model. I think when we put out the RFP, that's going to be important how we frame it, because it does put people to a higher standard. It takes more work, yes. Not everybody can get the federal, I blank, and the federal low-income tax credits. And so I realize there's these challenges that we're working with, but it is pretty clear that the public is concerned about our housing crisis, and so that was the biggest thing that came up. And also what came up that I wanted to ask about in the presentation, there's a section about neighborhood stabilization, and there's 3 points that were placed on the slide about anti-displacement, neighborhood stabilization plan, development without displacement overlay district. And all of these things I'm highly interested in. We've been talking about it, some of my colleagues and I, we've been talking about what this could look like. So I guess I would like to know more about, if you could say more about these components and how we plan to operationalize them.
Yeah, so I think the slide is really is condensed to further explanation of the community development plan itself. But what we heard was, I wanted to write just anti-displacement, just to sort of let the public know that we heard that loud and clear. But I think it's the second probably bullet point, that the need for a neighborhood stabilization plan. Because I think at the very beginning there was this question about, are you going to plan for anti-displacement, or are you going to focus on Midtown? It felt like we needed to focus on Midtown because it was such a complex thing. And also, because of the rough start we got in the engagement process, how might we think about creating a neighborhood stabilization plan that's much more focused and working directly with community organizations to create that plan? So the third bullet point was taken from a document, a report that Policy Link and Chainbreakers and the other community organizations worked on. I think, Alex, you were involved in that as well. And it was an idea that it provoked something in me, like, there's maybe something here. So it was what I thought that another question that they might want to ask during their planning process, like, is this work for us? How might it be actualized? So I don't have answers to all of it, but it discusses a little bit more in the community development plan.
Yeah, I guess I want to know how we plan to incorporate those, because I don't want to put them in a presentation because they're buzzwords. We did work on them. There's community groups working on this, and to operationalize it is important for me to understand, and I'd like us to dig in more, I guess, to try to figure out, like, how does that fit into the whole RFP process. Then I think about Link. I was there for Link, and I was part of that process, and I think about that provision that I added so that maybe Alex can remind me, we put in language that would support the neighborhoods that are most impacted. Can you explain that a little bit more, Alex? Because I'm trying to figure out how that's going to be operationalized, because we haven't seen it yet in action. And we put it in as a provision. I thought we thought we could make it work, but can you say a little bit more about that? Because it kind of directly, it actually directly connects to the neighborhood stabilization piece.
That's correct, Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal. We wrote in that any fees that were collected for multifamily, market rate multifamily rental as a redevelopment project along that corridor would be used within a defined boundary of the corridor. So it captures pretty much all of the surrounding neighborhoods as well as the Midtown campus.
As a way, wasn't it more like in the form of impact fees? We talked about different ways. Part of it was like economic stability, part of it was housing stability, and we haven't seen it like actually we haven't seen it being utilized, mostly because we haven't seen the kind of redevelopment we were thinking that Link would offer. But maybe,
Madam Chair, Councilor Real, that's correct. We haven't seen it yet because we haven't seen anything yet. And I will look up that issue of the capital impact fees. Any of the fees in lieu of under the Santa Fe Homes program were to be redirected in those surrounding neighborhoods. And I remember the conversation about the impact fees, and I feel like they are. But I would want to look at it to confirm, because we had a lot of conversations about that.
so with that, I think we should think about what that's going to look like for the campus, because that provision will actually should be, well, in theory, the way we were thinking about it should be helpful in the neighborhood stabilization aspect. So if we can maybe figure that out, talk about that more in depth later, because I want to try to figure out how that could potentially help us in achieving neighborhood stabilization.
It was part of the conversation too, because I wasn't aware of that, and it was Alexander that brought that up to me, and how we were thinking about, well, if we limit then in lieu fees, those in lieu fees could potentially benefit surrounding neighborhoods and the Lake District, et cetera. So it was like this give and take, and then we thought, well, rather than dictating it and being extremely prescriptive, that we would acknowledge it in the community development plan that RFPs could potentially be more restrictive on certain dispositions, others less. So we could write an RFP that says absolutely no in lieu fees allowed on this property. The next one we might want to we maybe want to contribute to the Housing Trust Fund because we want to see some units on adjacent properties or in adjacent neighborhoods. So anyway, so we thought we'd let that be more flexible so we can play that out and respond to needs in the future and not be so prescriptive right now.
Okay, thank you. The other questions I had, let's see. Just process-wise, I was trying to understand in terms of what we think about arts and culture or the hub. The Santa Fe Art Institute is currently is leasing space. So would they need to formally apply to continue utilizing that space, or?
No, they have a 99-year lease on that
Oh, okay.
space. I think it's like $1 a year.
Got
So they'll be there.
I couldn't remember how it was structured, so.
Yeah.
But they could incorporate other partners, right? And they probably should, because it's a big property and it does also need some redevelopment aspects to it. In terms of governance structure, we keep talking about the metropolitan redevelopment area possibilities. Are there other options that can be applied to the campus in different parts, or does it all have to fall under one governance structure? Like, could you use TIFs, or could you use other models in the same place next to something that's related to them?
Yes. I mean, like I was saying earlier, the more development tools that we have at our disposal, the better. So we're, by establishing the MRA, we at least establish the kind of the infrastructure, if you will, for creating different types of development tools, whether it's TIF, CDEs in the future, community development enterprises, which collect money to be able to reinvest in projects. But anyway, different types of entities that could sit within the MRA as it moves forward.
So is the MRA like the umbrella piece, and then any other models that could be used fall underneath that umbrella?
Yes.
Okay. Curious about the community stipends. I know that was just recently launched. Do we have organizations that have applied already for the?
Great.
Did you want to add to anything?
No.
Governance? Okay. For community stipends, have organizations applied yet?
Madam Chair, I can speak to that, or maybe I'll. Yes, so I have set aside some funding for the stipend, and Director Ladd and I and one of her staff, Ms. B. Hill, have been looking at proposals. I think we have 3 now, and one of them is large, so we're going to break it up into little parts because they have so many crazy, great ideas. But there are 3 now that are that we have. I think there's 3, Ms. Ladd, yeah. So there's 3 that we have looked at so far.
Okay. Thank you. Bless you. In terms of that map, I was trying to figure out what happens to what I call the island properties. So that's the Higher Education Center. I think the State Printing Building is right there in the corner near the park. I think that's what that circular. Okay, wait. Then where's? Okay. So the State Printing Building is one of the potential swap? No.
I'm sure Council Villarreal, no, the state printing office is running. They're not interested in swapping that land out with us.
Where is that? Why am I not seeing that? Because what I was thinking was the property is actually Nava?
Good, good.
I don't have that option.
It's right there. Did you see where he pointed?
So that swap parcel that you were talking about, part of it isn't going to be swapped because the State Printing Building is on there, correct?
Madam Chair, Council Villarreal, keep in mind that that map does not delineate the different parcels. There's like 8 different parcels there. So the printing office may be just a rectangle in that polygon there that you're looking at.
And then the higher ed would basically be an island separate from everything around it.
Technically, yes, but we're building access points so we can. One of the things that I can share that I think is something we're hoping we can keep the discussion going is that right-hand little green space there, the public school system owns that, and we're hoping to be able to work with them to build affordable housing there. So the HEC will still be a part of the whole campus, and as we think about innovation and entrepreneurship, they are very connected, and you'll see that's why there's lots of connectivity all over the place there, so that we build a walkable location, and we have a mixed use that's there. So we don't want to make them an island, but right now they're separate land and separate owner.
Right. Are you talking about the green space south of it?
Yeah, the green space south of it,
Which
yes.
is partially an arroyo,
Yes, so there's definitely some land planning that needs to be done.
not the right hand, but the left.
The left hand, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And then, I think, let me make sure. I think that's it. I just want to, maybe I can talk to you after about the website, just to make it easier to navigate, because I couldn't find the ENN notes. It took me a while. I went different routes, so, but that's one of many things that I was like, oh, look at this. Where did this come from? I didn't know this was on here. So, yeah, but we can talk about that if it's possible to make some adjustments to it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilor Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll make it kind of quick, 'cause we've already been on the topic for quite some time. Most of the questions I have were asked by my colleagues. At the same time, we know that at what point do we foresee a break even for this? Because, I mean, we know what it's costing us. We know that we're in a deficit at this point. But how long does it take us to get to the point where we're not paying out money? I know we're not in the business of really making money, but at the same time, I think it being an asset to the city and obviously also being an area that can be utilized, and that's what we're trying to achieve here, I think. So, with that being, with all the costs and everything up to this point, where do we start seeing solvency with this?
So rather than me getting too far into the details of that, the land economics part of the team is going to be starting to make presentations to the Finance Committee. I think that they have 3 presentations as a series about land economics. We're calling it return on investment, and what that projected timeline looks like based on land values. So again, the more that it'll be iterative, and it'll be decisions that will be ongoing, but at least we're going to provide some base assumptions, and they may change. Conversations we've even had tonight about higher levels of community development lowers land value. The payback period for an ROI or return on investment looks different than if you're like maximizing every piece of land on that thing. So those are the kinds of discussions that can happen in the future, but we did set some baselines. So rather than preempt that discussion, they're focusing on kind of a series, this 3-part series of the land and the economics of the redevelopment.
So I can appreciate that, but, and again, what a difficult task to try to please everybody, and it's almost an impossible task, but I think that you're on your way towards that with what you've presented, and so I'll leave it at that.
If I may, though, some of these early one of the ways of reducing burden is by disposing of some of these existing buildings in these early RFPs, so that we get them off our operating budgets, because they do cost money just to operate empty buildings as well. So that's one strategy. The other one is one of the first RFPs to go out is the film expansion, and so these will be, one of them at least will be a higher revenue generating source than the other 2, but and also during those negotiations, we'll be talking about ongoing revenues potentially for the city through licensing agreements from the production companies. So this is more still to come, but we're trying to chip away at that burden.
Thank you. I have no other questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. I just want to point out what an exciting moment we're at. I mean, this has really been a long time coming, and to be moving forward and having these proposals starting to come through, our processes that's a really exciting moment. And I think that we should take a moment to recognize all the work and the hours that have gone in from staff, and our contractors, and I really want to thank everybody. This has, it's obviously not done, but there really has been so many hours that have gone into this. All of our community engagement partners, the Midtown engagement partners, and all the work and time that they put in there, really such an incredible effort. And so I think being at this place right now, and I know that there is a bit of discomfort as the governing body does start to move into the role that we take on for the approval of land development, that also does signal the fact that we are moving to a new phase. And that is extremely exciting, especially because what I have heard loud and clear from my constituents in District 4, which obviously is where Midtown sits, is, my goodness, when are you going to do something here? And so I know that will be something that they will be excited to hear, and hopefully we'll take advantage of the opportunities to continue to weigh in as we start to move through these public processes. One thing that I do want to talk a little bit more about, because I do think it's kind of this interesting component, is the land development plan, the master plan, and how we balance both really focusing and meeting the needs and desires of today, as well as knowing that those needs and desires may change, especially as we look at this development over the course of a decade, two?
Yes.
Yeah, we frequently talk about this, especially when we're talking land use, we talk about this with the general plan, and we sit there and we say, oh my gosh, the general plan is 20 years old. And we really need to, be looking at this and updating this, and this no longer reflects where Santa Fe is. And so I would like to understand a little bit more about how this process starts to look up, what we set up now. My inclination is that this is part of the MRA process, because, elected officials come and go, staff also turns over, they don't necessarily have that political piece. Who is it that really starts to kind of both drive this thing forward, as well as recognize if in 15 years what is left over for development in Midtown is no longer appropriate for where Santa Fe is, and we have to start turning what undeveloped parcels there may be. How are we both secure as well as flexible? It's an interesting balance to strike. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about those thought processes.
Well, so we approach this from a perspective of creating a plan that can be flexible to respond to policies and community goals into the future. But we knew that right now there were clear expressions of objectives from the communities that needed to be captured and incorporated into somehow this plan. So the regulatory land plan, I don't think will not change for people. It's also extremely difficult to change an ordinance, a land use ordinance. So we want to at least establish what can be built there and what cannot. A steel mill cannot be built there. But we knew that we wanted a mixed-use district, and these are the top priority uses. That's regulated now. That you don't want that to change. I don't hear anybody thinking that that's questionable. So those things are part of the regulated land plan. The flexibility in the land plan is that we didn't say, at that corner right there has to be a 4-story building with a tower on it, and it has to have this and this and this and this. We can do that as we dispose of properties through the RFP. And so as the plan evolves and needs change and desires change, we can begin being more prescriptive with each RFP. But we didn't want to do that with the master plan, or then we would have to renegotiate the master plan, take it back to planning commission, et cetera, et cetera. So we wanted to be as flexible as possible to respond to the market, community goals, and policy goals that the city may have. The community development plan, that can change. So that may have a lifetime of 7 years, and the governing body at that time may say, let's just revisit that community development plan. Do we want to change some of the goals and priorities established at that time? It's a lot easier to change than an ordinance in a city ordinance. So again, it allows for the flexibility we think that a governing body would want to see, as well as the regulated elements of a plan that the public and governing body would want to see as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that, that explanation of how that balance is struck. I think that it is definitely a challenging one. In terms of prioritization, we have kind of talked about some of these early start programs. Is that going to be driven primarily by the community development plan? I mean, we know we can't do everything at once. And so how do we start to determine really the phasing of the development of Midtown?
Well, we know that there's a strong desire, and we heard it again tonight, units, affordable units particularly. So these early phases are one, just to start getting these buildings back working so that they get off of our books and we don't have the operating expenses related to them. And we see them also, that's one side, that's the economic side. On the other side, it begins to create activity at the site and market interest at the site for development. Affordable housing is often the first projects that get built in a neighborhood that's in, that needs development, and they often contribute to sometimes, improving the neighborhoods in ways that not everyone wants to see, because they're great projects all the time. They're well designed, they're well managed, but we think that, or we want to see affordable housing parcels go out in phase one, again, to begin stimulating interest, begin creating reasons why we need the infrastructure built on the site as well. So the affordable housing, at least one of the parcels, one of the 4 parcels will be in an early phase as well. And then we might want to immediately get that out with a mixed-use residential project that will have to comply with inclusionary requirements, but to begin stimulating other types of development besides affordability.
I think that'll be a really interesting, piece. I've had some, I believe, conversations with you about this component of, and Eric Ani, who is sitting in the back, I will give him credit for this phrase that I frequently use, is it's not just affordable housing, it's affordable living. And so I want to make sure that we are keeping an eye towards that as we are looking at the phasing of this project, as its units are, we know, are crucial, are absolutely crucial. It is also crucial that we are providing resources to community members who potentially do not have the mobility around the city. Midtown does have a lot of resources at their fingertips, which is, there's a grocery store there, there's parks, we really do have that, but thinking about what that interplay starts to look like, and I think that that'll be I do not have an answer right now, but an interesting balance for us to continue to strike of really making this an affordable living area, not just an affordable housing area for those individuals who we hope to be able to be living there relatively soon.
Yes.
In terms of how long development takes. I don't believe I have any other questions at the moment. So I want to thank you all so much for the presentation. Again, thank you for the work. And it is really exciting to watch us turn the page and start moving in the next direction. And I'm hopeful that some more individuals will take advantage of those stipends for that community engagement, especially those Midtown engagement partners who have already been so incredibly involved, and I think that they already have a really good base for communication. So hopefully we can get more of them to be interacting, especially over these next couple months while some of those pieces are being finalized, and I look forward to seeing you all at future meetings.
Yeah. Just one quick question, comment. Chainbreaker Collective, they're having their event tomorrow, right? Yeah, I think they're having an event tomorrow, and they've invited us to try to help clarify questions and stuff like that.
Yes, wonderful. I believe it's at 6 p.m.
Yeah.
So do you have details on that? We could actually, if anybody's listening, it'd be great for them to know. Oh, here we go. It's in my email.
Myself.
I don't have a location. Is it at Midtown? No.
Where is it located? I don't have it in this email.
It's on Fifth Street
Thank you.
at the Chainbreaker office. However, they have two, so I'm trying to remember.
I have the agenda, I just don't have a location.
Hold on, I wrote them an email. I'll search through our emails. We will find it eventually.
I have the detailed agenda, but it does not have a detailed address.
Right, I do not have an address anywhere. Let me see if I can.
Lee, do you know? Lee's on their agenda.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
it's at 1515 Fifth Street.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Tomorrow, 1515 Fifth Street at 6 PM. And members of the Midtown team will be there, so thank you for being there with them. Wonderful.
Madam Chair, may I add one more thing?
Yes, of
We're
course.
also having a ferry out on the south side.
Yes.
So there's a lot of things going on. There's an Angels event also going on, but there's a ferry on the south side too, so.
Yeah, it's an active day
Exciting activities
tomorrow.
going on.
A lot of places to go tomorrow evening, Santa Fe. So get out on a Thursday night. All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Let us move on to our items that were pulled off the consent agenda. We are going over to item A. This is a request for approval of amendment number 3 to the lease agreement between Garson Studios Santa Fe LLC and the City of Santa Fe for the premises located at 1600 St. Michael's Drive, Santa Fe, New Mexico. Allows leasee to request several or all holdover extensions. We have Lee Logston here to present, and counsel and Assistant Attorney Andrea Salazar, I believe, is here as well. I saw her walk down the stairs. And Councilwoman Vidal, floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to follow up from Finance, and thank you, Lee, for providing those responses. It was helpful to kind of see the breakdown. And then there was a follow-up question that I was also interested in that Councilor Lindell posed. And if you could explain how the rent was over $1 million with the base rent of $60,000 per month. I was trying to figure out that myself. You said that the income that we receive from Garson right now is, where is it, your email? Over 1 million. So if you could just talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. Thank you. Excuse me. Members of the committee, Councilor Villarreal. One thing I was careful to clarify was that they, and was raised by several of the councilors, is that they can actually use less of the space and they're not paying for it then. What I wasn't clear about, and should have been, is that they also have the ability to effectively use any space on the Midtown campus. So when you look at the base rent, excuse me, it describes certain specific buildings and so forth, but they can spill over, you know, into the Fogelson Library, into the Greer Garson Theater. They can use, you know, the Visual Arts Center grounds. I don't know what they do in the building because of the state, but, you know, so they also have the ability to use a lot more of the campus than that base rent indicates, and that's the simple answer to that's how they generate more than $60,000 on some months.
Got it. So it depends on what they're utilizing, and then we charge accordingly depending on what they need
Exactly.
for production.
Yes.
Okay, that helps. But that's all Garson Studios income. It's not coming from other sources of our other tenants. That's a whole nother separate. Okay. And then the other question I had was about the appraisal. And you had said appraisals are typically good for 1 year, but the appraisal, we didn't need a new appraisal because this is only, maybe you could explain that more. You're talking about holdover terms being amended versus, what's the other flip side of that?
The actual lease rate would be, so if we were, Counselor, if we were amending the actual lease rate or the base lease, you know, as we call it in this case, we would probably order up an appraisal. In this case, we were really only negotiating the ability for Garson to, how they could use those 4 holdover extensions. So they already had the 4 extensions possible, and they were just negotiating over their ability to negotiate with film outfits to, take 2 or 3 or all 4 of them at once. So an appraisal was not ordered up for that reason.
Okay.
And I do have Terry Lease here who can speak more on appraisals in general if you need more information than that.
I'm okay, actually. I think what I'm trying to understand is as we move forward and there's a potential partner that comes into play, and we're negotiating the use of those spaces, then a new appraisal would come into play, right? That would be required. I don't know how to describe it. If they're selling that, I mean, maybe Rich can explain this, because I keep thinking about these potential partners that would come in to run the studios. Would we still own the studios and then continue leasing those, or are we planning on selling them?
Yes. Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, that's a good question, and I may have both Terry and Ms. Salazar explain this, but the RFP will be sent out to either purchase the entire studio complex or lease it. We're hoping that we get a purchase because there's a lot more value in purchasing the whole studio. But in order for the disposition agreement to be done, another appraisal will have to be done to assess that value. But we are currently in a lease that was negotiated long ago, and this is just some of the terms in the lease, and they're just asking to exercise those terms. But in the RFP process, when we have a partner to contract, the option of lease or buy, there will be an appraisal process in this diligence that goes with the terms.
Okay, I just want to make sure that's the case. I think that's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Any other questions? And if not, what are the wishes?
Move to approve.
Got a motion and a second. Finance, we keep doing voice vote, and I always do a roll call here. And I'm not sure which it is, but we'll find out later. Let's get a roll call, because that's what I've been doing, and I will ask Aaron.
Oh, okay, it's Chair Councilor Cassett,
Yes.
Councilor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Villarreal,
Yes.
Motion passes.
motion
All right, moving on to the next item. This is item I. This is a consideration of a resolution sponsored by Mayor Weber, Councilor Lindell, Councilor Cassett, Councilwoman Villarreal, Councilor Chavez, Councilor Michael Garcia, and Councilor Romero-Worth. It is a resolution supporting legislation in the United States of America and the state of New Mexico to protect the right to a safe abortion. Andrea Salazar, Assistant City Attorney, is who I have on the docket to present, but I see somebody else at the podium, so. Okay.
Ms. Salazar is coming.
Salazar is here. Councilor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I understand the reasoning for this. I don't support it, but the reason why I pull it off consent. And so one of the reasons, and I wrote down something here saying not sure why the city has to pursue this, but I know people have the reasons for it. And so no really questions other than the fact that I just don't support it, and the only way to put it on is to pull it from consent. So if somebody wants to add to it, I would be okay with it. Thank you.
Councilwoman Villarreal.
I'd like to move to approve.
We have a motion and a second. Can I please get a roll call?
Councilor Cassett,
Yes.
Councilor Lee Garcia,
No.
Councilor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Villarreal,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Salazar. Moving on to our last item, this is item K. This is a resolution adopting the 2024-2028 Senior Infrastructure Capital Improvements Plan. I'm sorry, this is a resolution sponsored by Councilor Chavez. And it is a resolution adopting the 2024-2028 Senior Infrastructure Capital Improvements Plan, ICIP, for the Division of Senior Services, Community Health and Safety Department. And we have Anya Allred here to present. And I believe, Councilman Villarreal, you pulled this one, correct? To you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Anya, for being with us and being patient through this evening. And I actually just wanted to get some clarification since we haven't had ICIP for senior services in this way, and I think it completely makes sense. I'm in supportive of it, and I wanted to just quickly go over as I hold on. There we go. Go over the ICIP plan, the top 5, or in this case, we put top 7, right? So all of these things make complete sense to me. I think they're needed, they're long overdue, there's a lot of deferred maintenance that we're trying to catch up on. And so I guess my question to you was trying to understand a little bit more about how we came to decide that we want to pursue funding for a new senior center. And I don't doubt I guess I want to say first is I don't doubt we need an additional senior center. And I guess I wanted to understand if we've done an assessment of needs based on demographic data and trends, and then also looking at our current senior centers and looking at their capacity and if they're being fully utilized or they're at full capacity. And then also how it relates to state staff capacity to run another center. So I guess overall just wanting to know if you all did an assessment of where we have service gaps as it relates to senior services. Anya, I think your microphone's on. So do it again.
Press it again. You wait till the red ring pops up on the, there you are.
There we go.
Okay. So I am unsure of that question. I would have to talk to Gino tomorrow and then get back with you. I think our intent was when the South Side Teen Center was built that we were thinking that we would add on to that and do a multi-generational center. But at this point, I can't answer without Gino's guidance on that.
Okay, I think it would be important for us to show the public that we did our research and due diligence about why we need another senior center, and then also like where we're thinking it could possibly be. And I think that's part of the planning part, and that's why we need funding. But when I look at our current centers, and I was figuring out what districts there are, we have 5 that we run, correct? And when I look at the districts, 3 of them are in District 2, and there's 1 in District 1 and 1 in District 4, so obviously there isn't 1 in District 3, and so that makes sense to me. But I'm also wondering, like, okay, where are we seeing more of our senior population living, or where we potentially would be seeing them into the future? And you know, right now, most of our younger population and demographics are on District 3. So that's why I'm like, okay, let's look at the data and what it's telling us so that we know that we're making an informed decision. And we're also looking at our current facilities, because from what I've heard, and also obviously from this ICIP list, it's very clear we need upgrades to our current facilities. And so I think we all are in favor of that. But just really looking at gaps in service and what we're needing and where in the city. And then the other thing is that our capacity as staff to be able to run efficiently and effectively our senior centers. I liken this to actually the teen center. I remember when we were excited about the funding, and I looked to staff and they're like, oh, wow, we have a new teen center. You all are going to have to run it. And they're like, yeah, we don't know how. We don't know what staff is going to cover that. So it makes me think about senior services too, because we want to do something and do it well and not have a senior center where we're, you know, at half capacity. I mean, right now we're still recovering from COVID and we don't have our senior services functioning at all, right? I mean, to full capacity. And I get complaints from my constituents saying, I want to go to senior center, I want to go not just eat, but be able to utilize the services that we used to and we can't. So I'm just thinking about these things ahead of time, and so that we can cover our bases. And so maybe Gino can send me info. I know this is going quickly, and through the process, it will go to the governing body. So I think I'll probably depending, maybe Gino can send me enough information, but maybe we need to talk about this more at governing body, just to make sure that we're covering all areas. And then the other question I had, there was an item for the Mary Esther Gonzalez Senior Center for replacing the carpet, and the amount is $10 million. And I was like, is that an error or a typo? Because then I looked at the HVAC requirements, and we've seen in our HVAC requirements for other facilities, they're very expensive. And I think the amount for the HVAC said let's see, where is it? 161,000. So maybe it's a minor need, but it sounded like we needed to replace them. So I was like, okay, maybe we need to double check those numbers. Is the 10 million wrong?
It's incorrect. Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, that is incorrect.
Okay.
I think it's supposed to be 10,000.
Well, that makes a big difference.
Yes.
So we need to adjust that. And then the other thing that made me think about carpets, because, look at this carpet we're dealing with. It's like, now that we're thinking about COVID and health, does carpet really make sense anymore? Even for like the cleanliness for you all to be able to, or staff to be able to clean it, what makes sense for our facilities? Carpet to me doesn't, and just thinking about what's best for you all in terms of the best route. So I just want to flag that, and maybe Gino can talk about why carpet versus maybe another type of flooring that we didn't consider that would be more hygienic and easier to clean into the future and maintain, I guess. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I do. So the main areas where we have carpet flooring are in our office spaces. So the rest of our facility is all tile.
Does it make sense to continue carpeting in your offices? Just curious.
I think so.
Okay. Maybe a sound thing.
I was about to say, there actually is a benefit to carpet in office spaces because there's not as much echoing, so people, I'm a really loud typer, as y'all. It's like
Can you keep it down over there?
I'm touching the keyboard.
Yeah, I thought about that, but now that you told me it's just office space, that makes more sense. I kept thinking about recreational spaces, and I'm like, ooh, yeah. So thank you for that. Anything else you want to?
I have one more comment to add. So, in the plan and design phase, I think that's where we would start to, reach out to the public and figure out if a new senior center is what we really, is that a necessity, is that a need? And we do have the funding for that right now. So we did get awarded the $368,000. We will receive that contract anytime soon, probably within the next couple of weeks. So we can reevaluate that then.
So that amount, the $368,000, is for community engagement and like a outreach process?
Yes, plan and design.
Got it. Oh, and design. What if you get feedback that people don't think?
I don't have an answer to that question.
I don't think that they'll say no. I think we all want more services. I guess I'm just trying to think about how we maintain what we have in a way that they're functioning.
Fully
functioning, thank you. Fully functioning centers instead of adding a new one that we can't maintain. So I'm always thinking about this like ahead of time because, politically everyone's like, yay, let's do this. And I'm thinking, well, there's other things that we need to account for. So
I agree.
All right. So maybe if you or Gino could send me more information about that, and then I'll chew on that and see if we need to have a discussion about it at the governing body meeting in a couple weeks. So that's all I have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? And if not, what are the wishes of the committee? The motion is second. Can we have a roll call, please?
Chair, Councilor Cassia,
Yes.
Councilor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Council Villarreal.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you so much. Okay, moving on, we have nothing on discussion, we have no executive session. Moving on to matters from staff. Rich, do we have any matters today?
Madam Chair, thank you very much for asking. There's no matters from staff from.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Any matters from the committee?
Yes, Madam Chair, just got a question, point of clarification, given the shopping cart ordinance change.
Yes.
Got pulled. Does that mean if it gets reintroduced, it comes before us, or can you, I guess,
Yes, at this moment, the sponsors have pulled it back. And so if they decide to move it forward, it does depend on, are they reintroducing it with a new caption? Is it the same bill that continues to move forward? So based on any changes that they make, that would determine the path. At this point, my understanding is that if they were to decide to move forward with it as is, then it would need to come back to quality of life, because that is the path that had been established when it was introduced. If there is a reintroduction, then we would go through reintroduction.
Okay, fantastic, thank you.
Any other matters from committee? Matters from the chair, as Rich mentioned, there is the Feria South Side that is occurring tomorrow. That is, again, back to my emails and I should be pulling things up ahead of time. Let me find Bridget's email. But this is essentially, thank you. Look at Councilor Lee Garcia having everything at my fingertips. Thank you. So this will be from 4 to 7 p.m. at the Fraternal Order of Police at 3300 Calle Maria Luisa. So just another exciting event related to economic development, which of course is one of the departments that feeds up into quality of life. So I wanted to make sure that we highlighted that. And with that, we are adjourned at 6:47 p.m. Thank you so much, everyone.